Hello everyone, welcome to another video on using Excel. In this video, we'll look at an easy introduction to what we can do with the existing count functions provided by Excel. So let's begin. When we look at the possible count functions within Excel, if you just type in the word count as a function, you immediately see the various options which are available to you. This includes count, count A, count blank, count if, and count if s, or count ifs if you want to call it like that. So let's look at each of them briefly and then we can take a deeper dive into it. So when you look up the function count, Excel, as you can see, gives a description here. It says counts the number of cells in a range that contains numbers. The description is obvious. If you use count, it will be able to give you the number of numbers in a certain range, in a certain column or in your selection area. Let's look at the next one, which is count A. Counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. So what this function will return is the number of cells in a range that are not empty, in other words, which are filled, and they could be filled with either numbers or text or alphanumeric values. Let's look at the next option that we have. This one's pretty obvious. This one's called count blank. It counts the number of empty cells in a specified range of cells. I don't think this one needs an explanation. The next one that we have is COUNTIF. And COUNTIF counts cells provided they satisfy a certain condition. So remember, in this case, it is looking for one specific condition. And if that condition is satisfied, it will give you a count of all those cells that meet that condition. An extension of COUNTIF is COUNTIFs. Now, COUNTIFs, as an expanded version, basically takes in multiple conditions, applies those conditions on the same or different ranges of data, and then gives back the count of cells that meet all of those different conditions for the specified ranges. Now let's take a look at each of these examples one by one. So here we have some example data already built in. So let's say this is the data for an organization which has a certain number of employees. The names of the employees are given in column B. We have their date of joining in column C. We have their role or organizational role in column D. We have their annual paycheck or salaries in column E. Then in column F, if any of these employees have taken a loan or an advance against the paycheck, that number is going to show up in column F. So for example, here we see 2,500 against Wade. So that implies that Wade has taken an advance or loan against his paycheck for $2,500. If you see this cell here is blank. That means Dave has not taken any loans or advance against the paycheck. That's the interpretation of these cells. The next column is alternate phone number for contact. So this is assuming that there's already a primary phone number for each of these employees that the organization has. We have not included that in the table, but for the purpose of the problem, what we will look at is alternate phone number for contact. And the reasons for that will be obvious later on when we look at the exercise. So let's start off by looking at count. So let's say we would like to count the number of people who have an existing loan or advance against their name. So the way this would work is by using the simplest of the functions for count. And within this, if we give it the range for the column which has numbers for ongoing loan or advance, if we select this range and hit enter, it gives us the number of 4, which as you can see is true. There are 4 people against whose names we have an advance or a loan against the paycheck. So this is how the count function would work. Now, let's say we were to apply the count function on column G, and let's see what happens. All right, as you can see that when count is applied towards column G, you will, okay, this, we'll have to do this again. Let's select this again. and check. And there we are. It gives the number as 0. So it didn't work. Now, why didn't it not work? Now, remember that count only works on numbers. And what you have here in terms of phone numbers is alphanumeric. You have some numbers, you have some dashes or special characters, and as a result, the count function will not work here. Just something important to bear in mind. You'll be able to see the same functionality if you were to apply count on anything else which is non-numeric. So for example, if you apply count on the cells for the employee names, you still get the answer as 0, right? So why 0? Because remember that it was not able to find any numbers in these ranges. That's why the answer is 0. All right, let's move on to the next function that we want to look at, which is count A. So what count A does is it doesn't restrict itself to only numeric values. In fact, it will look at all values which are present. So let's say we want to find out the number of employees for whom we have an alternate phone number for contact. Now we already know that the function count will not work here because these values are not numeric. So here we can use the count A function, and let's see how it works. So type in equal or plus followed by count A, and then you specify the range on which you want to run the count functions. So now we specify the range, enter, and it says the answer is 9. So you can see that there are 9 employees for whom you do not have the alternate phone number for contact. Okay. All right, so let's move on. The next one that we want to look at is count blank. Now count blank, as is self-explanatory, would give you the number of cells which are blank. So let's say we were to apply this as an example on this data. So for instance, let's say if we were to do count blank and apply it on the cells for alternate contact number. So what we have here is 6, which means there are 6 people or 6 employees for whom we do not have the alternate phone number for contact. All right. So now let's look at a slightly different exercise. And this will need you to utilize what you just learned before. So let's say the problem we are trying to solve is that we want to count the number of people who have not taken a loan or for whom we don't have a loan amount in front of their name. So now we already know that using the count function, we can get the number of people who do have a loan. There we are. That number is 4. But what we require is the complement of this number. Complement, as you note from set theory, is those entries or those values which are outside of that set but are within the larger universe. So in other words, those cells in this context which are blank. So now how do we get this? Now we don't have a specific function which looks at blanks for non-numeric. So here what we can do is we can use a combination of different things. So first of all, what we need to find out is what is the total number of cells that we have here. Now I know we can all manually count the number of cells, but remember that whenever you want to see if manual work on an Excel sheet is going to be useful, just mentally do this exercise. Imagine that you have to do this for a large data set. Would it truly work? So in this case, for instance, we are dealing with a very limited number of employees, but for a large corporation, let's say this was 4,000 or 5,000 associates approximately, then getting a count for that, an exact count manually would be quite a task. So let's first get to understand how many cells are there in this range. Okay, so again, I'll just quickly color this. So this is the range for which we are trying to understand how many cells are there in this range. So how do we do this? So first of all, let's count the number of cells which have any values in it. So how do we do it? Now remember, we have a function called count A, which can give us the count of cells which are not empty. So if you go here and select this, it says the count of cells which are not empty is 4. Just for a reference, we can write that these are the ones which are not empty. And so the number we have here is 4. Okay. Just for the purpose of the exercise, let's quickly just give it a slightly different color so that we can associate with it. Okay. And then let's put the same color here. So we have 4 which are not empty. Now let's try and find out the number of cells which are empty. And we've just covered it. So the way you can do that is using a different function called count blank. If you select the range here and you hit enter, it says that number is 11. So 11 is, in other words, the number of cells which are empty. All right, let's put this as empty and let's color code this. Okay, there we are. So now with this, we know that the total number of cells that we have is the sum of the empty and the not empty. So we have a total of 15 values in here, 15 cells in here. All right. And now we also know that by count, we can get the number of numeric values, for instance, on this, correct? So the number of numeric values on this that we have, let's take a look at that. So the number of numeric values that we have here all right, let's rerun this. All right, so that's the number of numeric values. So if this is the number of the numeric values that we have, and we know that the total number of values is 15, then obviously the number of people who do not have loan against their name is going to be the total minus this. Okay. Now in this case, this might seem like a superficial example because you already had the empty as 11. But in those cases, imagine where you have cells which might not be blank, but it could have a text value, say like not taken or no loans taken or not applicable. In those kind of cases, it would be very helpful to build up a formula like this. All right. So this is how we can use count blank. This also gives an example of how you could potentially combine count, count A, and count blank functions for different exercises. Now let's quickly move on to count if. Now this one is much more interesting. So count if, let's first of all look at the syntax for this. So let's say the syntax for this is count if, and let's see the description that Excel gives. It says counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. So on count if, remember that the first thing that you must select is the range from which you're going to execute the counting function. Following that range, what you must also specify is the condition that you want to apply to that range. So for instance, let's say we want to count the number of people whose paycheck is, let's say, greater than $70,000. All right. So how do we do that? So let's start. So with count if, again, Excel tells you first select the range. So what is our range? Our range is the range for paycheck. So let's say we select this. And then we have the criteria. Now, criteria is the condition that you want to apply to this range. So let's say our condition is all those associates whose paycheck is greater than $70,000. Okay, so here's how this works. The criteria is specified in double quotes and the criteria comes in between. So we want all those people whose paycheck is greater than $70,000. All right, so let's see if this works. There you are. It says that there are 5 people whose paycheck is greater than $70,000. So this is how a condition would be applied. Okay, so let's quickly check. We'll just quickly color it up. There you are. These are the 5 people whose paycheck is greater than $70,000. Okay, so let's just mention it here. Okay, now let's say we want to find out the number of people whose paycheck is equal to $90,000. Remember, it's equal. Okay, so equal 90K. All right, so again, let's start. So if we type in the function, we select the same range that we have here, and then in this case, the value we are looking for is $90,000. Okay, so that goes in double quotes, and it gives you the answer of 3. So let's verify if we have that information. All right, so that's one that we have. Let's just quickly color code this one, and then we have another one at 90, and finally the third one. Okay, so this is how COUNTIF would work. You specify the range and you specify the condition. Now remember that COUNTIF doesn't just work on numeric values, it can work on text values also. For instance, as you can see on the left hand side in the column called employee, you have the names of the different employees. Now let's say I want to get a count of all those employees whose name ends with the letter N as in Nancy. So how do we do that? So there are a couple of key concepts here that we have to look at. So let's begin. So let's say we have COUNTIF followed by the range. Now remember, the count that we want to obtain is for the employees that we have. So we select the range right here. And now we have to specify the condition. Now, in order to specify the condition, remember that the employee names can be of varying lengths. And our requirement is that it ends in the letter N. So how do we accomplish this? Now, whenever you have varying length, one of the things that you can do, since you don't know what the exact length is you can use a general purpose wildcard character. In this case, we can use an asterisk. So when you use an asterisk, it basically means that a variable length of unknowns followed by the letter N would conclude our condition. So if you look at this, what this means is that we want a text field or a text which ends in the letter N, and prior to that you have an asterisk or a wildcard, which means variable length of letters before that. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, there we are. So this one gives us a value of 5. It says that there are 5 employees whose names end with the letter N. Let's see if that's indeed the case. All right, there we are. So names ending with letter. All right. Okay, so that's the use of a wildcard character within COUNTIF. Now remember that if you wanted to be more specific, for instance, let's say you only wanted the count of the employees whose names ends with letter N, and the total length of their name was, let's say, 4 letters, including the last letter N, for instance. In that case, remember, since asterisk is variable, we'll have to be more specific. So here we'll have to use a slightly different wildcard character. So let's go ahead and select the range. And now, since we want to restrict or limit the length of the names to 4 letters in total, these are going to be our wildcard characters. So here the question marks serve as wildcard characters occupying a single letter space. So that's why we specified 3 of them followed by N. If we try this, it says 1. So it's apparently saying that there's only one employee whose name ends with the letter N and is of length 4. And as we can see, there's only one which is right here. So this is the one that we would be using. And so as you can see, so there is considerable flexibility that you can get by using wildcard characters. either a variable length, or if you want to limit or restrict the length of these characters, then you could use that as well. All right, so let's extend this idea a bit further. Let's move on to the idea of COUNTIF-S. So COUNTIF-S is a much more expanded and much more powerful version of COUNTIF. Here you can specify multiple conditions and apply those conditions on different ranges as well. So for instance, let's say that we wanted to get the count of all those employees, let's say who are processors, whose role is that of a processor, and let's say whose date of joining, for instance, is before 2019. So let's see how this would work. Let's start off with the COUNTIF-S. What's our first condition? We want those whose roles is a processor. Okay, so let's select this range. And what is the criteria that we would want to use? The criteria that we would want to use is processor. Okay, we want their role to be processor. And what's the second criteria? The second criteria is that we want their date of joining to be prior to 2019. Now, where do we have the basic raw data for date of joining? That's in column C. So let's select this range right here. And then after that, we have to specify the condition. Now, condition is they should have joined before 2019, right? So in this case, the condition is before January 1st of 2019. That's our condition. Okay, let's go ahead. And there we are. It claims that we have 6 employees who are at the role of processors and whose joining date is before 2019. So let's take a look. So these two are processors, and this is before 2019. Let's take a look at another one. This is also before 2019. All right, and let's move on. This is before 2019 as well. These two are also before 2019. This one is after 2019. So let's see how many do we have. We have 6 of them. So as you can see, we were able to merge and combine multiple conditions and apply them on different ranges to try and get the appropriate count. So this is what we had in terms of the counting functions for this exercise for today. These functions can be expanded and can tend to become extremely powerful when used with other advanced methods like array functions within Excel. It is also possible to use different sets of operators like AND and OR in combination when you're using different count functions to give much more power and leverage to the different counting mechanisms that we have explored today. All right, that's what we had for today. Thank you so much for watching the video. See you next time.